Good afternoon. I'm Sheriff Manuel Gonzalez III. Alongside me today is Captain Nicholas Huffmeyer with headquarters. He'll be doing the presentation portion of our deputy-involved shooting that occurred on December 7th of this year. So at approximately 8:15, Bernalillo County Dispatch received a phone call from the Albuquerque Police Department Dispatch turning over a call that occurred earlier in the evening at about 7:15. That incident occurred at the intersection of Blake and Coeur Southwest at the Allsups. And the victim of that incident actually called later from the residence at 6200 Montano Plaza Northwest. The person called dispatched, our deputies were dispatched to that call at about 9 p.m. that evening and arrived on scene. While on scene, they came in contact with the victim. That person's name is Sandy Alvarez. While they were there, they discovered that there was a domestic battery that had occurred. And during the time they were there, the offender showed up, who was Mario Diaz. While they were there, one of our deputies detained Mr. Diaz, took him to his vehicle handcuffed. While Diaz was in the vehicle, at some point he slipped one handcuff. And then during that interaction with the deputy, he actually fled on foot. And our deputy ensued a foot pursuit, and a physical altercation took place. The deputy yelled over the radio that he was in a fight. Other deputy that was on scene was assisting him. Her name is Deputy Tyler Feist. They were involved in an altercation. Diaz had pinned her and was holding her on the ground. At some point, she yelled some utterances about her weapon, which prompted the other deputy to disengage from the fight on the ground, pull his service weapon, and fired 2 rounds, striking and killing Diaz on scene. At this time, the captain is going to go into more detail and a timeline of the events that evening. What we do want to warn everybody about during these presentations is that this footage is very graphic and is not suitable for all viewers, and definitely not suitable for children. Also, during this press conference, while the captain or myself is up here, we'd like to limit questions to 1 question per person. But also, what we'd like you to do is say your name so the captain can state your name and restate your question for the audience. Thank you. Captain.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. If I could just direct your attention over here to our presentation. So as the sheriff mentioned, the series of incidents that took place on the night in question start here in the parking lot of the Allsups, located at Blake and Coors, that is in our South Area Command. It's there where the domestic violence incident allegedly takes place inside of the vehicle. The termination point of the incident is here at this apartment complex located at Coors and Montano. As best we're able to determine, the victim had a spare key for the vehicle, and when the alleged offender, went inside of the convenience store there at Coors and Blake, jumped into the driver's seat of the vehicle, started that vehicle, and proceeded to return to their joint apartment, which, as I mentioned, is there at Coors and Montano. Somehow, that gentleman is able to get a ride. I don't have the details on how he arrives back at their joint apartment. Some kind of an interaction takes place between the two of them, at which time, and you'll hear this on the dispatch recordings, she is actively hiding from him and trying to get into apartments, neighboring apartments, to hide from him while she's on the phone with 911. He arrives, is contacted by our deputies, and then we'll show you the video footage. We have the benefit of several pieces of video footage to show you today. But on the screen here, just as you saw at our last press conference, this is a kind of a minute-by-minute breakdown of the critical pieces that happen as they unfold throughout the night, starting at about 7:15 with that initial domestic violence incident taking place at Coors and Blake. And you'll see at about 9:17 p.m. is when the male subject arrives back at their apartment and is contacted by deputies. About 9:33, and we'll show you this from the in-car mounted reverse-facing camera in the car that shows the cage in the back of the vehicle where he slips the cuff. And then at 9:35, there was shots fired being called out over the radio. So the next thing that you're going to see on screen is that graphic image that shows the audio representation, as well as you have the 911 calls, you have dispatch communication with the deputies, and you have some deputy-to-deputy interaction as the fight is taking place there. So you'll see that information first, and then next we'll show you a variety of video footage. And what we've done is we've taken all the video that we have and we've synced it in time. Rather than sit here for an hour and show you 4 different camera viewpoints at a time, there'll be 2 up on the screen at once, so you have both deputies' lapel cams on at once. We'll show you again that rear-facing camera from the car when he's in the vehicle interacting with the deputy. And then we also have the benefit of an independent third-party citizen who was filming the incident from a cell phone. Granted, the distance is a little bit far and it is slightly grainy. This apartment complex is very dark, and I think that's the first thing you'll notice from the footage, the lapel cam footage in particular. It's extremely dark, extremely difficult to see exactly what's happening. You can see some lights and some shapes, but I think you'll see when you watch the footage just how dark it is. But we do have that other video. That independent third-party cell phone video is also synced in time, so that'll be showing on screen with the other videos. So you'll be able to see all of those from different viewpoints of the incident, all simultaneously happening. This is the deputy body camera from when the alleged offender returns to the apartment. Go ahead and pause it right there from Joseph. You notice that the alleged offender had a backpack on. That's particularly important because what we have ascertained is that at some point they had to remove one of those initial cuffs to take the backpack off to properly secure the subject. And it could very well have been at that point that when the cuff was reattached it wasn't tight enough. It's difficult to know for certain, but either way, he's detained there initially. He is removed from that one cuff to get the backpack off as best we know, and then he's recuffed and secured into a vehicle. All right? Go ahead. This is that rear-facing camera seat. Pause it just one moment. It's sped up. He's sitting back there a long time. You're free to IPRA the entire footage. It's quite lengthy of him sitting in the back of the vehicle. We just sped it up for the purposes of today's presentation for time's sake, but there's no cuts. This is seamless footage from start to finish. He's seated in the back seat. Go ahead, Joseph. Thank you. He's seated in the back seat. That's the moment where he removes the cuff. You can still see the other cuff on his right hand. He does try to take that one off as well, but he can't get it off.
Bernalillo County 911, what's the address? I have a transfer for you. Okay, it's underneath this apartment. Okay, was this the one that you had called on earlier? Or? Yes. Okay, he's on the line. He showed up. He's there now. Okay. All right, are you there?
Okay, I need that. I'm afraid. Like, I'm trying to knock on the door, so nobody's answering the door.
She's with you now.
When he just took my stuff, I had my bag, and he just, I went to knock on the same door right now.
Okay. So you're outside now?
Yeah, I'm outside the apartment, but he's like walking around, so he's trying to look for me. So we need to be able to, so there.
And you're outside and he's inside. I want to make sure I have this correct.
Yeah, I'm outside the apartment, but he's coming outside with me. He knows where I'm at. I'm trying to even run in the dark, like, he might chase me.
Okay. Stay on the line with me, okay? Keep me up there. Okay, your officer said it that way. Does he have any weapons?
I put it both sides. He was here. I was in him.
Is that him that I hear? Ma'am?
Well, I'm sorry, I'm so scared right now.
Okay. Are you hiding from him right now?
No, I can't hide
Okay.
from my gun, but hi.
Okay.
Hi, I want to see if you can come inside real quick. Yeah, I'm fighting with my boyfriend right now, and I just called the police on him because I'm trying to get away from him. Yes, I know. Is that okay?
What department number are you going into?
This apartment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is he intoxicated or on any narcotics?
Yeah.
Which one? Both?
Yeah.
Second on cover.
6200 Matani Plaza, apartment number 12, February 27th, late. There is a 1015 down south at Quarries and Lake also provided an hour ago. There is a 17 back then, now she's wanting to make one. And we're actually getting an open line from the female where you think that she's outside of the apartment and he's inside now. They live together.
Morning, sir.
Female going to the neighbor's house at Oceans. Type in the mail, she's advising that he is 18 and on 57.
Morning, so we have our offender change.
Where is it?
No.
That's what he said, it's code 900.
Let's make him a third.
Yeah, on your stomach.
That's 160 or 187, code 900.
187, so shots fired. One suspect down.
Pause it for just a second. And just for clarity's sake, so that you guys understand how we piece together all of the dispatch recording, obviously it doesn't all happen that fast, right? That was like 30 seconds in time, but we just remove the blank air, right? So all we're giving you is just the transmissions. There's lots of time that's taking place in between that. And when you look at the body camera footage, I think you'll see just how much unused airtime there is. So that's why all of that seems like it happens in rapid succession, because we're just giving you the audio without the blank space. Go ahead.
I hear what you're saying, but we're not gonna just let you go.
It's still my fault.
Just go what?
It's still my fault.
Well, I mean, the time to argue about your innocence or guilt is in court.
Oh, come on. You gotta help me with that. Come on. In court still?
Right? I mean, that's where you're found innocent or guilty, and that is in the court of law.
You want to take a piss right quick?
No, I hear you.
Now that news come out. You mind, please?
No.
Oh, come on,
We
please.
should be done on, no,
Just
get
let
back
me
in the
know.
car.
No,
Get back
I mean,
in the car.
come on. Just, hey, bro, I gotta take a piss, bro.
Get back in the car.
Please, bro.
No.
What do you, no.
Go ahead and pause it. So you'll see he's trying to coax the deputy into letting him out of the vehicle. He's using a common ruse. I need to use the restroom. I want to smoke a cigarette. Those are common things we've all heard before. And then you see there's like a violent lower body movement. It's impossible for me to tell if he's kicking the door or if he kicks the deputy. Either way, he's able to, in pretty rapid fashion, get out of the vehicle. And you can see how easy that is to be done, especially when he's already managed to slip out of one of his handcuffs. Go ahead.
Yo, let me take a piss, yo.
No.
Please, bro.
160 minute 32.
Come on, bro.
Again, that second camera is synced in time, okay? So that's happening at the same time.
Stop this thing going, bro. Let me take a piss, bro. Okay. I am. Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. Yo. Please. I ain't doing nothing.
Get on your
I am.
right now.
I am.
I am.
Put your hand behind your back.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Get on your stomach.
Please.
I will tease you again. Get
What
on
am
your
I saying?
stomach. Get on your stomach or I'm going to tease you again.
Please.
Let
Get
go.
on your stomach.
Guys, please.
Get on your stomach.
Listen to me.
Get on your
I didn't
stomach.
do
Get on your stomach.
I didn't do
Get on your stomach. If you grab me, I will tease you again.
I'm not.
I'm not
I'm not
playing.
driving. Please.
Get on your
Please.
stomach.
Please.
I am not playing with
Please,
you.
I didn't do I swear to God.
Get on your
I'm not lying. It's not in my stomach. Let it in my stomach. Yeah. Yeah, please. I ain't got no beef with you. Please, I ain't got no beef with you. Please. Please, I ain't got no beef. I ain't got no beef.
Let go of me!
I ain't got no beef.
Let go of me! Let go!
I ain't got no beef.
Let go!
Grab me.
Let go!
There we go.
Let go!
There we go.
Pause it right there, Joseph.
There we go.
Let go!
It's very difficult to see. You can see how grainy that is and how dark it is outside. But if I could just describe as best I'm able to determine what you're looking at. Deputy Gallegos is seated behind the suspect. The suspect is facing away from him and is actively engaged with Deputy Feist and has her by the hair up around the neck area and head and is trying to take her over to the left-hand side and forcing her down into the pavement. All right? So, and this is very common when individuals fight with police. You'll see incongruent responses, right? He'll say over and over again that he's complying verbally, please, please, please. At no point in time during the altercation does he ever stop physically fighting. I think that's important to know. Go ahead.
We're human.
Let go!
There you go.
Let go!
Look.
No, don't touch me!
Please.
Don't touch
Please
me!
help me.
No!
Stop. I got you. Please. Please. Let me go, please. Let me go. Let me go.
Get off!
I didn't do nothing.
Get off!
Listen to me. We're human. We're human. We're human. Let me go.
One 8-7, still shots fired, shots fired. One suspect down.
So you can hear the utterance that Deputy Feist makes. It's very not entirely garbled, but as best we're able to determine, it sounds like she says, my gun's gone, or he's got my gun. It's hard to tell because the muffling of the microphone rubbing against the clothing and other things during the altercation. As best we're able to determine it is some combination of that. And in response to that, Deputy Gallegos responds accordingly, consistent with his training, fearing that his partner might have been disarmed or that there is now a gun involved in the fight that the offender might have. Okay, but you can see how dark the footage is. It's very dark, and that's just a limitation of the technology as we have it currently. So let's go ahead and move on. This is the alleged offender of the domestic violence incident and the decedent. His name was Mario Diaz. He's 41 at the time. He does have a significant criminal history spanning quite some time. Best we're able to determine, he is a convicted felon. Although not every charge that you see on the screen is a conviction, some of those charges were just charges that were later either no-lead or not prosecuted for some reason. And I don't have all the details on every single case that he was charged with. I do know that that second charge there on the screen did involve our same victim. All right, next. This is Deputy Gallegos. He's been with our agency for 3 years and 5 months. He is the individual who fired on scene, and this is his first deputy-involved shooting. The second deputy on scene, Deputy Taylor Feist, also been with our agency for 3 years and 5 months. So I'm sure there's questions. I'm happy to answer them. As you all probably recall from the last press conference, I'll be as detailed as I possibly can. I'm going to stick to the facts as I understand them. It's not for me to make a case necessarily about the shooting. It's not for me to speak on behalf of the individuals that you see on the screen. So I'll do my absolute best. One thing that I noticed when I was watching back the previous press conference, we're unable to hear your question. And so I think just for everybody's benefit, I'll repeat the question back so that the microphones pick it up. And if you wouldn't mind, just tell me who you are and where you're from. Okay, so with that being said, I'm happy to take question.
Yeah, Nick with ABQ Raw. With this particular case, there was like a year ago, there was the same instance. It was domestic violence, but it got dismissed. My question is, what is the sheriff's office and other law enforcement agencies doing to maybe strengthen domestic violence laws? Because it seems like the victim didn't want to testify the last time, and then now, I mean, it seemed like it was going to be the same cycle, but then we end with a deputy-involved shooting.
Right. So the question was kind of a broad umbrella question, as I understand it, about the cycle of domestic violence, the criminal justice system, and the interplay between those things. You know, when I was preparing for today and listening to the criminal investigators and watching the video, the thing that I was struck by was that it's a tragedy from start to finish. Right? This woman had to keep a spare key for the car for just such a situation like this, in case she had to escape this gentleman. And you're right, there are victims who don't feel like that they can come forward and that they can be safe to testify against an offender. And that's a very widely known psychological circumstance that happens in domestic violence situations. So is there a story to tell there? Absolutely there is. And we would like for that story to be told about the cycle of domestic violence. To drill down to your question specifically about what are we doing, we're not the legislatures. We can only enforce the laws that are on the books, and we can continue to arrest these people. But I would say that stiffer penalties for violent offenses, particularly things like domestic violence, we would always be in favor of that, absolutely. Next question. I saw your hand first, yes ma'am.
Hi, Brittany from KOB. So whenever you were kind of walking us through the video, you had mentioned that Deputy Feist had, said something kind of garbled. Did you guys later ask them, whenever you're doing your follow-up investigation, whether or not the offender did have the gun or was grabbing at the gun? Can you kind of clarify, I guess, what you guys, obviously what we heard, we couldn't necessarily understand like you mentioned, but further investigation.
So the question was, what kinds of questions do the criminal investigators ask during the interview with the deputies involved, and would we ask a specific question like, well, do you recall him having the gun? Is that a fair representation of your question?
Upon further investigation of this incident, did you ask if the offender was grabbing?
Well, you're saying it wouldn't be me, but the multi-agency task force, they probably would ask a variety of questions. That may be one of the questions that they asked. I don't know, because I haven't listened to her statement or the questions that were asked of her. I think that while I mentioned that the statement she makes is somewhat muffled, I think it's pretty clear that the intention of the statement, I mean, anybody could watch that and see. She's indicating that her weapon's gone. Now, whether or not he directly has it or not, that's not what she's verbalizing at the time, because she's trying to get that information out to her fellow deputy as fast as possible. So I think to boil down your question, you may have to wait until the criminal investigation file is completed, and then you'd know exactly word for word what questions they ask her.
I just didn't know if you guys had that.
This is Elise Kaplan from the Albuquerque Journal.
Yes, ma'am.
I just kind of want to follow up on that really quickly. So we don't know if he actually took the gun or not.
So the question was, do we know if he disarmed the deputy or not? And no, ma'am, I don't know that.
Okay.
Yeah. And that was.
But it's limited to one.
Is there another question? I thought I saw one more hand towards the back. No? No? Okay.
Who was the deputy that handcuffed Diaz?
That appears to me to be Deputy Gallegos, because Deputy Gallegos is the one that walks him down and secures him into the vehicle, and Deputy Gallegos is the one who's standing at the car door while he's trying the I've got a pee ruse, that I mentioned. We see those types of things quite often as a means of trying to get out of the vehicle. Okay?
And Brittany again from KOB, as far as, because it appears obviously slipping out of the cuffs, does Does that happen often? Were they just maybe too loose, or do you guys know?
So the question was, are suspects or people who are detained able to slip cuffs often? I wouldn't say it happens often, but it does happen, yeah. And it would just be a matter of, his anatomy, his wrist size, his hand size, how tight the cuff was. There's some logistics that go into that. You'd be surprised, when people are desperate and they want to get out of a situation, particularly one where they don't want to go to jail. It's quite remarkable the things that they're able to accomplish.
Anyone else? Go ahead.
Stephanie with KOAT. In that call, the victim said that the offender, Diaz, was intoxicated and on drugs. Do you guys know if a toxicology report was done on the offender on whether or not he was using drugs or alcohol?
My understanding is that, well, let me repeat the question. The question was, did we order a toxicology report on the decedent? My understanding is that's quite common practice, and yes, but I don't have the results of that. All right, last one.
Last question.
Here, you got it, last one.
And I'm sorry because we walked in late.
That's okay.
But are those deputies back at work? Can you tell me the status of I didn't know how long of a period off they took? Or?
Yeah, Deputy Gallegos is back. Deputy Feist has not returned yet. And the question again, I'm sorry, I'm trying to repeat what you guys are asking, is whether or not they've returned from their standard administrative leave. So 1 yes and 1 no. Thank you all very much for coming. Again, we do have the presentation to provide for you. It is in this format directly. So if you want the full footage, you guys know how to get that. And then again, when the criminal investigation is completed, you're free to IPRA that case file as well to see those details, okay?
And any follow-up questions, you could go through Jamie or Deputy Montiel for follow-up questions. Thank you. We appreciate
All right.
it.
Thank you very much.